Okay, so the topic that we're going to get into is the topic of mindsets. These are sometimes called types or personality types, or they're called subpersonalities. But the basic idea is we are of many minds, actually. There's parts that we have. And oftentimes our personality is made up of one part at the expense of other parts. So if there's a table and where all the parts are gathered around, actually do not have a seat at the table. Whether you think of that as a board, like in a business, or just a dinner table, and it's a family system. So I want to look into just some basic mindsets or types that you guys can use through the practice of inquiry. And the reason I think this is so important is that we don't know what we don't know. The ego is so tricky. And it's one of these parts that is often doing the work. And so we have blind spots and biases when it comes to even how we do the work. So with that, where do these come from? So of course, they're hardwired. These are evolutionary defense mechanisms. So when we perceive a physical threat, we know what the fight or flight mechanism is. If you want, you can add to that freeze and please. So we have these hardwired biological survival mechanisms that show up in us when we get triggered. And triggered means we're hijacked. Something else is suddenly flying the plane. And of course, it's the part of our reptilian and limbic brain is the amygdala. And that is what basically flips the switch, calls on the red alert. And even without cortical awareness, even without awareness of what we're doing, we can run away or freeze. So I think it's important when these threats become symbolic, like when we're a little child, the world is so much larger than us. And so it's perceived, maybe even before we have language, we're pre-verbal. Certain things bring us warmth and love and approval and appreciation, and other things cause us to receive shame or neglect or even abandonment. So very quickly, our little personalities figure out the things that we ought to be, and then the things we ought not to be. And then basically we suppress certain things until we can't feel them at all. They become unavailable to consciousness. They become repressed. So then we go about our day. This is who I think I am. This is my identity. This is who I ought to be in order to feel safe. So these, what happens then is things that appear to be figurative threats, like someone getting angry with us and saying, you know, you really screwed that up. And suddenly we're like one of these little guys here. We react to figurative threats or certain emotions as if we're physically being chased by a lion. And of course, the fascinating thing is that for one personality type, something will make them laugh, but for us, we cry. So why is it different? And what are the basic types that we can identify so that we can start to get onto ourselves and start also to notice what is at the core of our own identity? What do we believe we have to be in order to be okay? Who am I? And who would I be without that? So really simple way of splitting it in half. This comes from a couple different places. In the simplest sense of it being a polarity, there's two types of people, you could say. There are people who like to take care of themselves, but it can be at the expense of others. And then there are those of us who like to take care of others, but often at the expense of ourselves, our own personal power. This is M. Scott Peck talks about this in The Road Less Traveled. He asked the question, who is responsible? That's one of the most fundamentally important questions you can ask yourself in your life. And he's a psychotherapist, so he puts clinical words on it, like if you take too much responsibility, you're neurotic. And if you don't take any responsibility, you're narcissistic. But you know, if those are a little too labely, then we can just look to some kinder words for those things, which would be Bill Urey, who's a negotiator, brilliant, brilliant man. He wrote Getting to Yes, which is a bestseller. He also wrote The Power of a Positive No. he has a brilliant TED Talk as well called the Abrahamic Path, where he walks through all of the countries of the Abrahamic religions and basically speaks about what they all have in common. But that's neither here nor there. The point is he splits the two into three. This is a simple 2x2 here with highs and lows. So if you tend to yourself, but not others, that's the attack mindset. You tend to come off as asserting your own personal power, but you damage relationship. If you take care of others, but you don't tend to yourself, so low on the vertical, that's the accommodate mindset. You say yes when you mean no, and then you resent it later, which ironically means you become the attack mode. But you say yes when you mean no. You don't speak up or ask for what you want, and then you resent that too because other people aren't giving it to you. Or you end up in codependent abuse cycles where you're taking care of everyone else, and again, at the expense of yourself. And avoid is simply you're not attacking or asserting yourself or taking care of others. And same thing in the answer to the question of who is responsible. Not me, not you. I'm hands off. I won't bother you if you don't bother me. So also a defense mechanism. So this is kind of the basic 1, 2, 3. Any questions or comments about this first? What type do you identify with? And is it different at work versus at home?
Yeah, I was gonna say it depended on the context. I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when I am accommodating, am I then maybe turning the attack on myself?
Very wise, huh? Yeah, exactly so. So it's said differently. Someone who is attacking is accommodating themselves. And yeah, someone who's accommodating is attacking themselves. And that actually, anyone else want to answer this first? What type they think they fit into? Let's add a little more color, because here's where this goes. In 1968, the Cartman Drama Triangle was created as part of Transactional Analysis, which was super popular in the 70s. They had all kinds of meetup groups for TA, as it's called. And it basically looks at the parent-child dynamic and how you could be the mother or the father, although it doesn't have to be according to sex. There's someone who is the angry parent and someone who's the pushover parent. And then the child is either rebellious or compliant, the good boy or the bad boy. But this very quickly creates every story ever told, every drama that you've ever heard of. There's a victim who has a persecutor and then reaches out to be saved by a rescuer. And then notice how those are the same thing. So to Trey's point, rescuers persecute themselves. Persecutors rescue themselves. And the victim is one down. They're giving away their power either to someone who's persecuting them, or they're giving away their power to someone who they want to rescue them. So languaged this way, as victim, as persecutor, as rescuer, where do you spot yourself, at home or at work?
I think I can be any of them and all of them.
Right. Sometimes there's a situation where we literally have a kind of Neapolitan sandwich of all three. Like we start as the victim. So we had one client who said he spotted this at home, where he would come home from work and his son hadn't taken out the garbage. So what role is his son in and what role is he in, do you think initially? Go ahead, anyone answer? Yeah.
Dad is being victim and son is being persecutor in that.
Right, so there we are. We start with that. So dad feels like the victim and the son is persecuting him. And then it switches very quickly. And what do you think it switches to?
Dad becomes persecutor.
Dad
And
becomes the persecutor to son. And then what is son? Who does son run to?
mom usually.
Mom, usually mom. So then son runs to mom. Mom, I have all this homework. Dad doesn't understand. He's being mean. And then who does mom become to dad?
Probably persecutor to dad.
Starts to persecute dad. And then what does dad do?
He becomes the victim.
He becomes the victim again. And who does he become to his son? He goes and takes out the trash for his son.
The rescuer, yeah.
The rescuer. And because he sees his son as the victim. He was like white as a sheet, and he's like, I've been doing this for 11 years, and I'm just now seeing the cycle. So yes, you can not only rotate between all three, even within your own crazy mind, you can go through multiple roles in a single transaction. So why is this so important in the work? Let's talk about this for a minute. So if I have the thought, he blames me, and I get to the turnarounds, and I turn it around, what's a possible turnaround?
I blame me.
I blame me. So let's say that I show up typically in my life, I identify as a rescuer. What is the danger that can occur when I turn it around to I blame me? He's not blaming me. I'm blaming me. So what's the danger of that?
The danger is persecuting yourself.
And which actually reinforces the rescuer mindset where you let the other person off the hook or you don't speak clearly to them. He's not blaming me, I'm blaming me. It's my fault, which is the belief we believe to become a rescuer in the first place. Now, what would a persecutor be believing about someone else? Maybe the same thought. He blames me. But when you turn it around, what's another turnaround? He blames me, turned around.
I blame him.
I blame him. So this is where maybe the persecutor's blind spot is going to be. It's going to go, no, I don't blame him. So you're going to have to maybe, I have one, would you like to hear it? Maybe provide him with an example. So it's like this. You're going to find where your own blind spots are. And maybe if you're a victim, you can't see either one. There are no options available to you. When really, I blame me can be the very thing that stops me from showing up in a different mindset. So the point is you don't get stuck here. You can ask this question today in your work. I don't want to spend too much more time here, but ask this as a sub-question. Keep to the very basic sub-questions. How do you react? What emotions happen when you believe the thought? And when you go into how do you treat the other person, add what mindset are you in when you believe that thought? Make sense? And just see what you see. And if you're the facilitator, you might suggest, I have one, would you like to hear it? And then if you're the client, it's just their perspective, thank you, and not to enter discussion. Now, the antidote to the drama triangle was created by a colleague of mine and teacher, David Emerald, and his wife. And they saw that the antidote to the victim was the creator. So instead of focusing on the problem and what you don't have control of, you focus on what you do want, what you can choose. So you feel empowered instead of frustrated. This is also speaking to your commitments, not your complaints, or using your complaints to ask yourself what you're committed to. It's also what you value, what you envision. And of course, the persecutor, each one of these, even though they feel like, even though each one of these feels like negative in its own way, they also have an antidote, which means there's energy in it that is healthy, that is positive, that you can be transmuted. So if you're very angry about something, that probably tells you care about something, or you stand for something, or you want to protect something. So it's okay. Who are you without the thought? You can still be assertive. you can still be a challenger. You can still be directive or challenge someone to something on the basis of feeling calm and centered. Different than persecuting, but what's different is the energy. It's the mindset. And instead of being the rescuer who does everything for everyone, who fixes it, who shoulders the responsibility and puts everything on their own shoulders, you can be a coach. And here's the other trick. Rescuers and persecutors see other people as victims. Of course, so they can feel justified in their identities. But challengers and coaches see other people as creators. So if a rescuer is seeing someone as not good enough, or they need to fix it or do it for them or help them, a coach is less attached to the outcome, and the coach asks questions, open-ended questions, no manipulation, no agenda. The client is creative, resourceful, and whole, and can find their own answers. So in question 4, why is this so helpful in question 4? I think it's very challenging at first. Who would I be? Well, I don't know who I'd be without the thought. Would I just be sitting there drooling? It's like, no, love is action. Love is presence. Love is anything we have available that serves. So who you literally might be is one of these mindsets. Are you able to speak to what you care about, what you value without your story? Are you empowered to speak freely? Are you empowered to say, you know, I have a need, and would you be willing to give me X? Or can you even challenge someone? Please stop. Or can you be the coach? Certainly at work, this is helpful. Sit back and ask questions, seek to understand. And sure, maybe you do nothing at all, but loving what is doesn't mean we have to sit there in emptiness. There are many options available to us out of the space of loving what is. So I would like to get into breakouts. Any last questions, comments? I saw the chat. Palestra Leadership is my company for leadership, team, and organizational development. So these are some of the tools we love to use with our clients. Let me look at what else is in the chat. Yeah, any other questions, or shall we do the work?
Oh, yeah. What's TED?
TED is the empowerment dynamic. I forgot to say that.
Oh,
So the antidote to the drama triangle is TED. And I mean, even for clients who are just getting into being coached, it's like one of the stickiest, most intuitive models, because everyone can identify with the drama triangle, and then TED, the TED triangle, is the way out. And it also is a great way to start introducing the work, because rescuers have one-liners, persecutors have one-liners. You don't have to do a full worksheet at first. You can just pick, he's stupid, you know, as the persecutor, or I don't have any options as the victim, or it's not, you know, or I have to do everything around here as the rescuer. So great way into the inquiry as well.
That's not
That's a good question too. It's like when we are hijacked, it really helps to know how to breathe and get centered. Actually, the hypothalamus will tell, if we're physically relaxed and breathing, the hypothalamus won't flip the switch for the stress response. It won't trigger us. But what if we are? What if we are? You can build that like a muscle and kind of expose yourself to stress and keep breathing. But sometimes it's just too much. Like what do you do then? And that's the worksheet. That's what the worksheets are for. It's like, I'm willing to, and I look forward to being triggered again, because you notice how you said afterwards you caught it. So maybe the gap gets shorter and shorter each time I do a worksheet until I'm noticing in the moment and I can make the shift. And it just, they don't call it the work for nothing. It's a practice. And then maybe one day we notice that the thing that triggered us before is we're free. And, or what's the litmus test? Just being centered isn't the list. Like that would be great if I could be centered in the face of the thing that triggered me. But do you love them with all your heart? Then you know your work's done. And until that, you know, how long have I been doing the work? 15 years. It's like, it's still hard to look forward to it sometimes, but to trust that, oh, the worksheet gives me my way out, and that I don't have to figure it out beyond that. The gap will close in time.
Also, Nathaniel wanted to add, sometimes for me, my spiritual journey starts to look like a pursuit toward perfection. So there's this right and wrong. So what I heard for myself was, I shouldn't ever be triggered. Is it true? And, you know, where does that come from? That somehow I'm supposed to just be perfect. So there's a lot of work around like the acceptance of, is it okay? Can I be okay with myself if I get triggered? It's probably going to happen again. I get irritated at myself all the time until I look at, I'm thinking and believing I shouldn't be what's showing up. So.
May I share something?
Mm-hmm.
I can really relate to what you were describing. And I remember it really potently on a walk where I was doing the morning walk. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but basically it's to name things with first generation names. And I noticed what you were describing. I kept noticing that I would name the things, and then all of a sudden I would catch myself. I had been in a story, and I was like, okay, come back. So I'd start naming things again. And then at some point I'd catch that I had been in a story. But because I was outside walking, I could track like, wow, it's been 2 blocks. The last time I remember naming something was a long time ago. And I was getting so irritated that I couldn't even, like for 30 seconds, I couldn't even name things without getting lost in a story. And I was feeling so frustrated, and that's how I can relate to what you're describing almost. It's like this awareness of I've been hijacked, you know, I'm intentionally wanting to stay in presence, and there I go again. And then all of a sudden I realized that the moment I became aware of being hijacked, I was back into presence. And that the awareness of the hijack was the kiss of awareness back in. And the loop that I shouldn't have been hijacked was the hook back into being hijacked. But the awareness of it is, it's like I'm back. And it reminds me of this story by Rumi. I think it was Rumi. And he writes about this man who dreams of having all of his gems stolen in the night. And he wakes up panicked, thinking like, was it a dream or wasn't it? And he runs into the other room, he checks, and his gems are there. You know, and they say, so who's gonna call the cops? He dreamed that the gems weren't there, but they are there. And it's like that. It's like, I become aware. I realize that I was hijacked, but I'm aware now. Why am I gonna call the cops about something that's over? You know, it's done. Anyway, so just to share that, that was something that has supported me with that, because I can still totally get caught in that frustration.
Beautiful. I love that story. The gems are always already there. So I love this rich sharing, you know, food for thought, food for the soul, hopefully too, bread of the spirit. And let's do the work.